Let's talk about mercury, not the one in thermometers or astrology, but the kind that ends up on your dinner plate disguised as a healthy source of protein. Many of us grew up believing that eating fish was one of the best things we could do for our brains and hearts. And in many ways, that's still true. But the conversation changes when we talk about mercury, heavy fish. For seniors especially, this can be a game changer, not in a good way. You see, the older we get, the more vulnerable our brains become to toxins. We're not just talking about memory loss or senior moments. We're talking about subtle but steady damage to neurological tissue that mimics cognitive decline and fuels neurodegeneration. It's a silent sabotage, and for many it starts with a fork. Let me explain why mercury matters so much in the later decades of life. Mercury is a heavy metal. When large fish like king mackerel, swordfish, tilefish, and even some species of tuna feed lower on the food chain, they accumulate mercury from the smaller organisms they eat. This process, called biomagnification, means that by the time the fish reaches your plate, the mercury concentration can be dangerously high. And when you consume that fish, that mercury doesn't just pass through your system, it stays, it settles in tissues, it crosses barriers, it lingers in your body, especially in fat-rich areas like the brain. Now here's where it gets philosophical. We often talk about aging as a process of gaining wisdom, clarity, deeper reflection. But how tragic is it that these variabilities, our memory, our mental clarity, our emotional stability, can be quietly eroded by something we thought was helping us? What if a lifetime of making what we believed were healthy choices is actually undermining our most sacred asset, our mind? One of the most alarming truths is how mercury affects the nervous system. In high enough amounts, mercury exposure can cause tremors, vision changes, numbness, and even difficulty walking. But long before these obvious signs appear, the damage begins in the background. Studies show that mercury interferes with neurotransmitter activity and promotes oxidative stress, both of which are associated with cognitive decline and increased risk of Alzheimer's disease. For seniors already navigating hormonal changes, reduced circulation, or even mild memory issues, mercury exposure adds fuel to the fire. What makes this especially insidious is how gradual it is. You're not going to feel sick after one grilled swordfish steak. You're not going to suddenly lose your words after a tuna sandwich. But over time, repeated exposure builds up. And in the delicate brain of a senior, where neurons don't regenerate as quickly and inflammation already runs a little higher, that slow buildup becomes a serious threat. I've met patients who exercise daily, ate clean, managed their blood pressure and cholesterol, yet struggle with brain fog, anxiety, or mood swings. When we dug deeper, the connection became clear. Regular consumption of high mercury fish. It's not just about what you eat. It's about how your body handles what you eat. And at a certain age, our ability to detoxify declines. That's not a flaw. It's a biological fact. So what do we do with this knowledge? The answer isn't to fear fish, but to choose wisely. Swap the big predators like king mackerel, shark, and swordfish for smaller, cleaner options like wild-caught salmon, sardines, or trout. These fish still offer the omega-3 fatty acids your brain and heart crave without the toxic baggage. Be selective. Be informed. And remember that just because something is labeled natural or from the sea doesn't mean it's safe in unlimited quantities. We also need to challenge a deeper cultural narrative here. We've been trained to believe that moderation is always the answer. That if something's only a little harmful, it's still okay. But the senior years are not the time to flirt with cumulative risk. They're the time to simplify, to purify, to protect what's left. Your brain is not a testing ground for moderation. It's your legacy, your memories, your essence. We must protect it fiercely. There's also something profoundly empowering about this awareness. When you realize that something as simple as choosing the right kind of fish can influence your cognitive health, possibly even delay the onset of dementia, you regain a sense of agency in a world that often makes aging feel like a helpless decline. But it's not. You are not helpless. Every food choice is a vote for your future clarity, independence, and joy. Let's stop pretending that what we eat doesn't matter simply because the damage isn't visible right away. Just as rust can quietly eat away at steel, mercury can quietly corrode the very core of who we are. But here's the hopeful part: rust can be prevented. And so can much of the neurological damage we face as we age. if we're willing to look beyond the label, beyond the marketing, and into the science. Your brain deserves better than a side of poison. Choose fish that feed your mind, not rob it. That's not just nutrition. That's wisdom. Let's take a closer look at something many people overlook: farmed fish. At first glance, it seems like a brilliant solution. We're told that farming fish helps protect wild populations, prevents overfishing, and ensures a consistent, affordable supply of seafood. But when we scratch beneath the surface, the story becomes far more complex and far more concerning, especially for seniors who rely on diet to protect brain and heart function. The issue with farmed fish is not just about sustainability, it's about quality. It's about what these fish are fed, how they're raised, and what ends up inside their flesh, and ultimately inside our bodies. We've reached a point in modern nutrition where convenience is starting to clash with biology. When fish are crammed into overcrowded pens, swimming in their own waste, and fed a cocktail of processed feed, antibiotics, and sometimes even dyes to give them a more appealing color. That's not nature, that's chemistry. And it comes at a cost. Let's talk biology for a moment. A wild fish swims long distances, feeds on a diverse natural diet, and lives in a constantly renewing ecosystem. That movement, that environment, that nourishment, it all impacts the quality of its tissue, the concentration of healthy fats, and the purity of its nutrients. In contrast, a farm fish is often sedentary, unnaturally fattened, and exposed to a barrage of synthetic inputs designed to maximize yield, not health. And if you're someone who's eating fish for its omega-3 fatty acids, which support cognitive clarity and cardiovascular function, here's something sobering: those healthy fats are significantly lower in farmed fish compared to their wild counterparts. In fact, many farmed fish have higher levels of omega-6 fatty acids, which can actually promote inflammation, the very thing you're likely trying to avoid. And inflammation is not just a buzzword. For seniors especially, chronic inflammation is at the root of almost every major health concern, from atherosclerosis to Alzheimer's. So when your goal is to protect your brain and your heart, and your choices are quietly stoking inflammation instead, that's not just a nutritional oversight. That's a health trap. It's a situation where the very food you thought was helping may be pushing you closer to the conditions you fear most. But the problem goes even deeper. One of the most underappreciated dangers of farm fish is the potential for contamination with substances like polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, dioxins, and other environmental toxins. These chemicals are known to accumulate in the fatty tissues of farmed fish and can act as endocrine disruptors, interfering with hormonal balance and brain chemistry. Think about that for a second. Many seniors are already navigating a delicate hormonal terrain: postmenopausal shifts, thyroid slowdowns, metabolic changes. Now add in a food that subtly interferes with those signals. You start to see how what seems like a small, innocent meal can have ripple effects throughout the body. There's also a philosophical dimension to this that I believe we need to address. Food is more than just calories and nutrients. It's information. It tells your body how to function, but it also carries a kind of energetic blueprint. When we eat something that comes from a stressed, confined, artificially sustained organism, we are absorbing more than its proteins and fats. We are taking in the story of its suffering, its stagnation, its lack of vitality, and that changes us. Now, I'm not asking you to become paranoid about everything you eat. That's not healthy either. But awareness is empowering. And when it comes to brain and heart health, precision matters. Seniors cannot afford to eat mindlessly. Every bite must be intentional, chosen not just for flavor or convenience, but for how it will serve the body's most delicate systems. If you're eating fish to protect your brain, make sure it's not quietly poisoning it. If you're eating fish to support your heart, make sure it's not feeding systemic inflammation. There are better options: wild-caught salmon, sardines, anchovies, even plant-based omega-3 sources like flaxseed and chia. These choices support the body's healing and defense mechanisms without compromising integrity. They offer not just nourishment, but alignment with nature, with health, and with your long-term goals. And here's the truth: you deserve that. You've lived decades. You've earned the right to feed yourself in a way that honors your body's wisdom. Don't settle for cheap imitations of health. You wouldn't buy a fake medication. Don't buy a fake nutrition. The quality of your food reflects the quality of your self-respect. Let this be your takeaway. Just because it's called fish doesn't mean it's good for you. Ask more, learn more, choose more wisely, because your body is still listening and it deserves to hear the right message. Let's talk about something that sounds harmless, even familiar. Tuna. It's a pantry staple, a sandwich filler, a go-to for quick meals. But not all tuna is created equal. For many seniors, this seemingly innocent protein source may be quietly sabotaging the very systems they're trying to protect. And the problem, quite frankly, comes down to mercury. Now, mercury is not just a scary word you heard in a high school chemistry class. It's a neurotoxin. That means it has the potential to interfere with the way your brain functions. Memory, cognition, focus, emotional regulation. For seniors who may already be navigating subtle cognitive shifts, this is not a minor concern. It's a red flag. The older we get, the more vulnerable the brain becomes to environmental stressors. So when we introduce mercury into the system, even in trace amounts over time, we're adding weight to a fragile balance. You see, the larger the fish, the longer it lives, and the more mercury it accumulates. Tuna, especially the larger species like albacore or bluefin, sits high on that list. These fish can live for years, which means they have time to soak up an ocean's worth of pollution. By the time that tuna lands on your plate, it's not just bringing protein and omega-3s. It's bringing a heavy burden of neurotoxins that your body now has to process and in many cases store. Mercury doesn't just pass through the body easily. It lingers, especially in the brain, the kidneys, and the liver. And let's go even deeper for a moment. Mercury doesn't just attack your neurons. It disrupts the very electrical signaling of the brain. It binds to important antioxidants like glutathione, depleting your natural defenses. That's why mercury exposure is linked not only to cognitive decline, but also to mood disorders, fatigue, and even cardiovascular issues. It's not just about protecting memory. It's about protecting your identity, your personality, your presence in the world. Now, here's where the philosophical piece comes in. When we think of aging, we often accept a slow decline in energy, clarity, or sharpness as inevitable. But what if some of that decline isn't age at all? What if it's accumulation of toxins, of inflammation, of choices we were told were healthy but weren't? This is the part where food becomes more than sustenance. It becomes a message. When we eat fish like high-mercury tuna thinking we're doing something right, but it ends up harming us, that's not just a nutritional mistake. It's a betrayal of trust. So many people turn to tuna because it seems lean, affordable, and familiar. But familiarity should not be mistaken for safety. Seniors are uniquely positioned in the life cycle. Their systems are less resilient to toxic burden, and their ability to detoxify is naturally diminished with age. That makes every dietary choice more consequential, not less. And that's why continuing to eat mercury-laden fish like tuna without awareness is like playing nutritional roulette with your most precious organs. Now, I'm not saying all tuna must be banned from your diet, but I am saying we need to be more selective. Skipjack tuna, the smaller kind often found in light tuna cans, tends to have lower mercury levels than albacore. Eating it occasionally, once or twice a month, might be reasonable. But weekly tuna sandwiches made with albacore, that's not just comfort food anymore. That's a gamble. We need to think in terms of nourishment with precision, not just tradition. If you're looking for brain boosting, heart supporting seafood, there are safer bets: wild salmon, sardines, anchovies, even mussels. These fish are lower on the food chain, live shorter lives, and accumulate far fewer toxins. They give you the benefits of omega-3s without the neurological baggage. That's a much smarter way to protect not only your cardiovascular system, but your mental clarity, memory, and mood. And here's the deeper truth. Your brain is your last frontier. It is the seat of your wisdom, your stories, your love. Why would we ever risk clouding that with a toxin we could avoid? We spend our lives gathering knowledge and experience, and then in our later years, we risk losing it over something as preventable as mercury exposure. That's not acceptable. Not for you, not for the people who depend on your presence, your insight, your light. Let me leave you with this thought. Just because you've eaten something your whole life doesn't mean it still belongs in your life, especially if new knowledge shows it may be doing more harm than good. You have the power to change course, to protect your brain, to safeguard your heart, to choose foods that honor the years you've lived and the ones still to come. Let's talk about tilapia. Now, on the surface, it seems like the perfect fish, mild in flavor, low in cost, and easy to cook. It's marketed as a healthy choice, a white fish you can grill, bake, or pan-sear without worry. But if we dig just a little deeper, beneath the label, beneath the convenience, we discover a very different story. And it's one that especially concerns seniors who are trying to protect their hearts, sharpen their minds, and make every meal count in the long run. Tilapia, unfortunately, is one of the most misunderstood fish in our modern food system. It's often praised for being lean and high in protein, but rarely do we hear about where it comes from or what it's been fed. The reality is that most of the tilapia consumed today is farm-raised and not just in small, clean, controlled environments. Much of it comes from overcrowded, poorly regulated fish farms in countries where health and safety standards are alarmingly lax. These farms prioritize yield, not health, quantity, not quality. And when a living organism is treated as a product rather than a life, you can be sure the result is not something your body will celebrate. Farm tilapia are often fed a diet that includes genetically modified corn and soy, and in some cases, even animal waste. Let that sink in for a moment. We're talking about fish being raised on the cheapest feed possible, feed that's completely foreign to their natural biology. And what happens to any living creature that is consistently fed something unnatural becomes inflamed, diseased, and chemically unbalanced. And when we eat that fish, those same problems don't disappear. They're transferred into our bodies, our bloodstreams, and our cells. Now, inflammation is a term we throw around a lot in medicine, but for seniors, it's especially critical. Chronic inflammation has been linked to nearly every degenerative disease we fear in old age: heart disease, Alzheimer's, arthritis, even depression. Tilapia, particularly the farm-raised kind, is known to contain more omega-6 fatty acids than omega-3s. That's the wrong ratio. Omega-6, when out of balance, can promote inflammation rather than fight it. And here's the kicker: some studies have found that farm tilapia contains levels of omega-6 that rival those of bacon. Yes, bacon. So while you think you're doing your body a favor by choosing fish over red meat, you may be unknowingly feeding the very flames you're trying to extinguish. Let's zoom out for a second and take a philosophical view. We live in a world where information is abundant, but wisdom is scarce. We hear headlines, we scan labels, we trust that if something is in the supermarket and labeled healthy, it must be good for us. But that's not always the case. Health is not found in marketing claims. It's found in the origin of the food, in its journey from source to plate. And that's especially true for something as sensitive as brain and heart health in our later years. We can't afford to be passive consumers. We have to become informed guardians of our own biology, and that means asking hard questions. Where does this fish come from? What has it eaten? What kind of environment has it lived in? Because food is not just fuel, it's information. Every bite tells your cells something. It tells them to thrive, or it tells them to break down. It tells your immune system to defend you or to turn against you. The difference between healing and harm is often a quiet, invisible decision made at the dinner table. I'm not saying you should fear all fish or feel paralyzed about every choice you make. But I am saying this: tilapia, especially when farmed under questionable conditions, is not the gentle, brain-boosting food it's made out to be. There are better options. Wild-caught fish like salmon, sardines, mackerel contain more omega-3s, fewer inflammatory compounds, and come from environments that more closely mimic nature. They're the fish that work with your body, not against it. So when you stand in front of that seafood counter or open that restaurant menu, think of your future self, your sharper, steadier, more vibrant future self. Every decision matters, especially now, because what we eat in our 60s, 70s, and 80s isn't just about getting through the day. It's about preserving what we've spent a lifetime building: our wisdom, our vitality, our connection to the people we love. Here's the truth that's both empowering and humbling: food can be medicine or it can be poison. And when it comes to something as deceptively harmless as tilapia, that choice is hidden in plain sight. Choose the foods that speak to your strength, not your weakness. Choose clarity over confusion, because in the end, protecting your brain and heart isn't just a matter of diet. It's a matter of self-respect.